Thank you very much. What a great pleasure to be here, to take part in this wonderful summit, talking about something very dear to our heart, which is education technology. With that, I would like to make sure that we have enough time for question and answers and proceed to actually now introducing my panelists with me. Just allow me a little bit for those who do not know us and want to understand why I feel so passionate about education and the tech and innovation startup ecosystem, as I'm the co-founder of WHub, and we define our mission and passion on helping startups grow and scale their business and actually arguably helping all stakeholders to tap into the innovative power of the tech and innovation scene. And we do that through various services, talent recruiting for startup, talent development, also co-innovation programs between established companies, more traditional companies, and startups through co-innovation challenges and hackathons, etc. We're also a proud core organizer of the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival with SIS, Scale Up Impact Summit, back again very soon in December and May next year. And arguably, when we said that we want to help startups grow and scale, to connecting them to all the resources they need, funding and fundraising is another important one. We'll make sure we touch on that also in the context here of this panel. So we also founded Angel Hub, the sister platform of WHub, which is Hong Kong's first and still only SFC-regulated startup investing platform for professional investors on the one hand side, and then startups that are scaling from all over the world here in Asia. So I'm very thrilled that you will see we have a super international panel, and so we will look at the topic from various also geographical angles. So with that, I need to make sure that I do get a sign from the organizers that the panelists are in the starting block and ready to contribute, and here they are, beautiful. I know that Jennifer will be joining us here in person on stage, and she's making her way through the lines out there. But with that, I would like just to make a quick sound check and to see if Mia, Stina, and Olli and Ivy are all set, are all good to go. Why don't we start with a quick introduction by yourself? And I was really debating and hesitating if I should do that on your behalf, but I felt, nothing better than feeling the passion from the speakers themselves. So I would like to open up the stage and give you the opportunity to introduce yourself very quickly. And I'll add one more difficulty to that. I would like you to end your introduction with a bold statement about EdTech. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and we ask Mia, Stina to start us off. Please introduce yourself and don't forget your bold statement about EdTech at the end.
Hello, and thank you for being part of this panel. So my name is Mia-Stina Heikkala. I work for Helsinki Education Hub, and I'm one of the key persons for driving this international EdTech startup and innovation hub in the city center of Helsinki. So we aim to be global, and we have a Finnish pedagogical competence, and our aim is to develop it together in Finland and internationally. And my passion for EdTech is that EdTech is the driver and solution for solving educational challenges globally. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you once again for being here with us on this panel. So, Olli, you're next. Please shoot away.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here. My name is Olli, and I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Education Alliance Finland. What the EAF does, we evaluate and certify the quality of educational technology solutions. So we have a group of 120 teachers here in Finland who we have trained to conduct quality evaluations of educational technology solutions. And by far, we have evaluated around 350 solutions globally and granted almost 200 certificates by far. We get to see a lot of products, so I suppose I should have some very valuable insights on the EdTech market and the potential of educational technology. What I would say as for a bold statement regarding EdTech, I would say that the use of EdTech in schools and for learning purposes will completely change the ways how we use our creativity as part of the learning processes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And once again, welcome. And then Avi calling us from Israel, right? So please proceed with a quick self-introduction and your bold statement.
Thank you, Karina. I'm Avi. I'm running Mindset, which is an EdTech innovation hub based in Israel. Actually, you can see our headquarters here behind me. And we are, our main activity is about startups in education. We run a few accelerator programs, and we have a venture building arm that starts startups from scratch. I think what's unique in the way we work is, first of all, we put a lot of efforts working with the users. Schools, teachers, students are really part of the process of what we do. And we really believe that we should meet them from day one. And the other aspect, we are a global entity. Israel is a very small country, like Finland and like Hong Kong in a way. And we're really looking for networking with our colleagues across the globe. Our main vehicle for creating this conversation is the GSI Awards that we honored to have today, the semifinals here in Hong Kong. Competition 7 years ago, and it became to be an online community, and maybe we can elaborate on this later. And last, we also try to help startups to grow, and we in a bigger fund to do it properly. As to the bold statement, I'm not sure it's that bold to say that, but we think that EdTech is really starting now. Like when we're going to look back on the history, we're going to count EdTech from 2020 ahead, and I think it's not going to be like anything that we saw beforehand. So this is our prime time, and hopefully we're going to see the outcomes coming soon as well.
Great, thank you very much, and once again also welcome to you. Now, Jennifer, I'm glad I have somebody sitting next to me here face to face. I would like to introduce yourself by a self-introduction, so giving you the opportunity to do that. And at the same time, I changed a little bit the rules of the game, and I said, I want you to finish off with a bold statement about education and EdTech.
Okay, great. First of all, pleasure being here. Kara and I have known each other for the greater part of a decade, and lovely to be in this room with familiar friends and new faces and friends as well. I'm so excited and honored because Hong Kong, I think, is an ideal bridge, and Cyberport is so kindly hosted this wonderful conference. It's an international conference, and I think we're all about building bridges and connections and collaborating together in this collective face of the future. So my name is Jennifer Cheng Lo. I'm a serial exited entrepreneur and an investor. I invest from my own family office, which I created after my first big exit almost a decade ago, which was Hong Kong, one of the first Hong Kong unicorns. I'm also a millennial mom of 3 kids, so I'm quite busy. I love EdTech, not only as a super user for my kids, but in my spare time, in between investments and still venture building right now, I'm a concert pianist by training. So I really believe music, education, culture, arts, these collectively make up EdTech. People ask me why I became an educator, an education, or whether I became an entrepreneur and an investor. And I think all roads lead to the same place. Education, EdTech is a way for us to save ourselves from our own humanity. It's the only way to stay ahead of the curve, and it's a way we can improve the world and our own outcomes for ourselves and our next generations. So that's my statement on EdTech.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, and welcome. Now, Olli, I'll start off with you, and the question might sound a little bit innocent, but I want you, again, for all of us to define what is EdTech actually? What is education technology? What does it mean to leverage technologies in building better solution for education?
Well, from our perspective and from my personal perspective, how I classify and categorize solutions to be EdTech is that The solution provides learning goals. Those learning goals can be either content goals, skills goals, or pedagogical goals, meaning the pedagogical goal meaning that the use of the solution will pedagogically enhance the learning practices. Whereas thinking the whole EdTech market and the product offering, how we tend to categorize it is that we see that there are this type of solutions that provide certain kind of content, like language learning solutions or code learning solutions or science learning solutions. And then there are this type of tools that don't necessarily include any content, but it's up to the teacher or up to the student to create the content with the tools. Like, for example, Kahoot or Quizlet or other kinds of quiz tools, or Nearpod, for example. So these are and we see as EdTech tools in the higher level.
Great, thank you. And one of the reasons why I wanted to start back is because later on we talk about the different stakeholders, right? I mean, overall, we're looking into ecosystems. We'll look also into how we can learn from each other and how solutions are potentially exportable, right? Geography or cross-geography wise. But again, coming back to the point on delivering content versus content itself, right? And how we learn and what we learn. Are there some specific case studies that you would say you would definitely include or potentially even exclude from the definition of EdTech?
Well, I suppose we can think EdTech to be something that is somehow used as one element as part of the learning processes. So, for example, schools, they use a lot of administrational solutions, communication solutions. Naturally, some of these communication solutions can, for example, reduce teachers' workload. So in that case, they do can play a centric role in the ways how students are learning and how the school's practices are working. But then again, with communications tools, I'm not so sure if you can directly name any kind of pedagogical goals or learning goals to be relevant to those tools, unless the communication tool is for providing feedback for students or communicating with parents about the students' progression, for example. But that's more or less how I see the field.
Right. And actually, Avi, bringing you into the conversation, again, from your perspective, what you see, maybe also what are some very recent trends that you can see in Israel in the field of EdTech?
Absolutely. And before the trends, maybe just a quick comment to what Olli was saying. I think since we are dealing with startups today, we can even narrow the definition even more, in the sense that I think startups are not just creating solutions of educational technology, they're also suggesting an alternative. Like, they're suggesting something which is not an amplifier of the existing reality that we usually face. And following this, like a few trends that we see out there, one of them is about the social emotional aspects. We see more and more startups who are or dealing with those aspects or plugging in those aspects to the product. This is one interesting area. The other one, which is officially here for a long time, but was not really the case, is AI. Like, I think everyone who works with startups hears these buzzwords all the time. Every startup says, I have tons of AI in my product. But I think in the last two years, and especially the last year, we see more and more real AI starting to be in the market. And this is extremely interesting. And even more specific, inside AI, conversation tools like chatbots or voice technologies that becoming to be very effective and strong and really can be a game changer in education. So this is, like, in a nutshell, a few trends that we see out there.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I love that you picked up actually, which was a little bit the intention of my very broad discussion, to say that we might be now redefining even what education technology is, specifically, running through this current, health crisis or pandemic that we have. And Miestina, from an ecosystem perspective, right? So you work also with corporates that are engaged in the EdTech ecosystem, schools, etc. So what are some of their expectations, or how, do they broaden now the definition of, solutions that they're looking for in the education space?
I think that the current themes for EdTech solutions are based on assessment, and what Avi mentioned is the well-being, and also STEAM-related topics, and of course AI. So if I look at our first ever EdTech incubator Helsinki applications, and our deal flow is not that much, it was about 40. So we are a small country, but we are very happy about this amount of applications. So there were STEM, language learning, and well-being in the centric, and also that how we involve learners to be on a centric role, so that how do they, for example, design the learning, because learning depends on motivation, timing, and interest. So these are very relevant themes. And also for business to consumer side, so there are these tutoring questions coming in. So not strongly in Northern European countries, but tutoring is taking place also in Finland, for example, that parents are paying for the services for the children. So this is quite a strong business area as well.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, let's bring the Hong Kong or Asian perspective a little bit in. So you as an investor, you see a lot of different companies and different solutions out there. So what are some of the elements that you would add on, you think we're missing out, we have not mentioned yet, in terms of EdTech solutions?
Well, I think, wow, you guys have a very multivariated, thoughts and key opinions, which I very much agree with my fellow panelists over here. I would also just say, like, from the parents as well as investor standpoint, I tend to invest in companies that I'm a super user of or a customer of myself. I think the first sign of a use case being valid is if you are intent on becoming a customer and you're paying for this service. So I actually, one of the things that I'm very lucky as I have 3 kids, as I mentioned, and they're kind of my guinea pigs for looking at something they're excited about using. And if they get excited about learning, then even better. So what I've learned also for myself, even before the pandemic, I noticed all of our collective attention spans are dwindling. It's not just the children, it's us. We're all having more screen time. So it's very important that whatever we do, whether it's lifelong learning or pedagogy or early childhood, that it's all interpolated within content being the key. So when a lot of people talk about curriculum, it actually extends beyond that to the content and core of what we're learning and what we're communicating to each other. And I think we get even more winning outcomes when people collaborate, and when sometimes the educators and those being educated are creating that content together, or at least interacting more than just a book, a chalkboard, a screen. It did take the pandemic to accelerate this interconnectivity happening faster. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you. That's a wonderful bridge where I wanted to go next. So after defining more broadly what we all agree on would fall under EdTech, so like who are we solving these, or the EdTech startups, who are they solving these pain points for, right? So who are the personas, who and what are the pain points? And coming back to you, Olli, first, looking at the teachers. So, again, the pandemic actually didn't really leave teachers with a choice, but now they are exposed to a multitude of different solutions. How to deliver content, also the type of content they should be delivering. What are the pain points that teachers face, and how do they navigate the jungle? What are some of potential solutions that you are providing to facilitate these choices?
Yeah, well, I suppose teachers are facing the same pain point as we all do in pretty much all works that we do, is how to reduce the workload. I suppose this is a global challenge for teachers, how to reduce the workload and still be able to adopt new innovative teaching tools and new technologies to be used in your classroom. As we all know that just learning to use one new application takes quite big effort. So definitely the workload is one thing, and I see that teachers can be the bottleneck for the growth or the implementation of new edtech solution. So I think that when thinking about personas and target audiences for edtech solutions, of course, it's always complex if your solution is being used by the learners or the students and educators and maybe in some cases the decision makers or administrative people as well. But thinking about the teacher, how to reduce the teacher's workload, how to design the application in a way that it's easy to adopt, easy to access, easy to start using, and in the long term, at least in the long term, it will critically decrease the workload of the teacher. That I see as a very critical thing for all edtech tools.
Right. But there's a question of know-how and as well as time and resources, right? So where do you see the bigger problem actually currently sitting?
Well, I suppose maybe the biggest problem with all learning practices and all education we have is that how to improve learning outcomes. I think that this should be the main goal for all edtech solutions in the highest level, improving learning outcomes. If you manage to do that as an edtech solution, the commercial success should follow. But then coming one step down from improving learning outcomes is maybe decreasing the workload, maybe decreasing costs. That's one part as well. And then of course increasing the engagement and motivation of the learners. And I see that this is sort of the second level under the improving learning outcomes. And then as an edtech developer, if you tick some of these boxes, reducing workload costs or increasing engagement, you're on the right track. If you cover all of those, then even better. And then under those levels, naturally, you have different ways for increasing engagement or reducing the workload. But that is something that is always useful to think about as a edtech buyer, as a teacher, and of course as a edtech developer as well.
Right, which Miestina, that's why I wanted to bring you back in. So again, obviously there's the layer between the user, which is the teacher or teacher and students, right? And then the decision makers, the administrators. So for startups developing these solutions, right? What are the support that they can get, and what do you offer, and what are some of tips maybe to better understand to how to navigate that? Basically, on the one hand side, product development, but on the other hand, also go to market and potentially even market expansion elements.
Yes, Helsinki Education Hub is first in the world to combine all these stakeholders together, and we are especially concentrating on early stage entrepreneurship. Of course, we are providing deal flow services from idea to innovations so that our edtech startups can enter into our deal flow services, for example, on an idea stage, but then if they want to accelerate their businesses, so then they can do that, and also on an internationalization side. So what we are also targeting at is the market entry, so that how we can find concrete leads and networks for edtech startups to enter to international markets. And also other thing is funding. So according to latest Holon IQ results, there were challenges on edtech startups on a global scale where funding on early stage and then support of this early stage entrepreneurship. So we are eagerly connecting and finding early stage investors to participate our services. And also for investors, what interests them is that they can see that what is popping up from our services, that what kind of companies we have in our incubator program, for example. And for the incubator side, so we are systematically supporting these EdTech startups on a market and sales, finding networks, finding this pedagogical competence, getting the funding and etc., so that they can build the pace for the businesses and then they can scale on. So these are the pain points and what we are targeting at the moment. Of course, there will be many, not to mention the research side. So Helsinki Education Hub is especially disrupting the innovations, product development and research. So we are putting EdTech startups into the flywheel so that because they are the ones that create momentum and power on the flywheel. So finding new ways to have new methods for research also on a shorter scale. Thank you.
Yes, and maybe just a very short answer in terms of who's backing you?
City of Helsinki is supporting us 100%. So City of Helsinki is really putting resources on EdTech at the moment. So we have had in City of Helsinki, City of Helsinki has been supporting actual verticals like AI, VR, clean tech, health, gaming, and now it was about one year ago. So we decided that next is the EdTech, because Finland is one of the best countries in education, but we haven't exploited this reputation and position sufficiently. And in order to do this, we are doing this together in Finland and with our international network.
Thank you very much. I'll get to the investor perspective in a second, but just want to get back because we talked about expansion, right? And so Avi, I wanted to bring you back in. And by the way, don't hesitate to build on also in terms of, how this is integrated into the policy, even, backing from municipalities, government, etc. You can build on that because I think there's a lot to learn from Israel as well. But particularly also on the expansion, right? Because Israeli companies are very well known to successfully expand globally. I mean, we invested into a wonderful EdTech company coming from Israel. So what are some of the success ingredients to successfully export EdTech solutions? I mean, is it possible? How much can you be a global company? How much do solutions need to be localized?
Well, it's a very good question. I think Israel, in a way, is creating a hard time for EdTech startups inside Israel. Like, it's a very highly regulated system in the educational system. So most of the startups are thinking globally from day one. They understand that the local market is a very good market to fail in, but if you want to really have revenue and to be successful, you need to look to other markets. So I think thinking globally from day one, it's a mindset. It's really, it requires you to be all the time with all your senses directed to other places. And it's important to start with this. And from the other hand, going back to the point of failing at home, the Israeli culture is very tolerant for failure. Like, it's okay for something to be not that successful, to modify quickly. And it is in the culture, of course, of the startups, but also in many of the educators. And Olli, you were mentioning the teachers who are afraid of receiving too much work. I can say that we created a community of early adopter teachers that are the opposite. Like, they want to be early adopters. They want to add more layers, and they are the real, let's say, oxygen for startups to understand what they're doing. So to summarize your question, Karina, I think it's a combination of using the local place for testing, but looking outside from day one.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you have one or two success cases in mind that you're happy to share, or?
Absolutely. I think maybe our poster startup, the Green Mindset, is CodeMonkey, that was acquired about 2 years ago by PAL Education, a Chinese company. But the journey that they were going through started when they created, they were alumni of Mindset second cohort, which was already 7 years ago. And when they started, there was no room in the Israeli education system for coding. And they created a successful game that was aiming to B2C, not to B2B. And And the Ministry of Education in Israel saw the big demand and then started to do like an Olympics about coding, and a year later created a mandatory time in every school in Israel to learn coding. So in a way, they generated a category, let's say in B2B or B2G, that was not existing beforehand. And I think this is a great model, but the revenue came in the end of the day not from Israel. It came from the States, from Japan, India, Latin America, etc. So, and they brought the same model afterwards to the other places.
Very interesting, which is a very nice transition to Jennifer. Just before to the organizers, again, if there are any questions from the audience, I'm not sure how I can get access to them, so just let me know if you have a slider or so where I can have a look if anybody has questions. But so coming to Jennifer, so one of the questions obviously is public funding versus private funding, specifically in the EdTech. But coming back to you, I mean, sometimes the question is education technology really something? Oh, wonderful, thank you.
So thank you guys for submitting to the Slido. You can continue asking live questions like that. And I'll,
Fantastic, thank you. Lovely to have you with me. But yeah, so first of all, the question to you as an investor, right? Is it about profit versus doing good, or can you make a great return by doing good at the same time?
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. Some people were asking me earlier how I feel as a VC, and I have to clarify quickly. Nushi Capital, which is my private family office, we're supporting the event too, is yay! I see some support from the audience. It's my private money. It's a proprietary funds because I'm a serial exit entrepreneur, and I like to put my money where my thoughts, where my mouth is. I don't like to just talk about doing good. I don't like to just I like to actually invest in things that can do good. And I think like one thing that we were talking about, our investment credo, is that when a startup comes to me and they're like, oh, we can make so much X, I'm like, that's great. Sorry, that's not our bottom line though. Like aside from making money and making money for people, what positive impact are you generating in the world? And the whole point is that EdTech is actually part of what we invest in, which is impact tech. It is investing in ourselves and our next generation. It's planting those seeds. It's actually, we are the most unrenewable resource. We're not even talking about water, we as humans. So we cannot, for me, it is so important. It is like a moral imperative that there has to be something at least a little bit good about the companies that we're investing in. It can't just be sitting around trying to make returns. That doesn't move the needle for anyone. So I think also the onus is not just on the educators and the edtech companies and the founders and the teachers, and the onus is actually on all of us, because I think we're all stakeholders in this, right? Not just family offices, not just the VC funds and the institutionals. I do ask though that sometimes if I'm looking at something early and if the bets start paying off, that the other investors in the community also start to add fuel to the fire. Other entrepreneurs too, that we can collectively raise each other up, right? That there's more follow-on funding for some of these overlooked founders. Some of them are like really amazing people. So I think there's a lot more from both an investor and a collective. All of us are stakeholders in this. I'm a child, I'm a parent, I'm a sister. We're all in this together.
Great. So arguably with that, EdTech would not require any special place with one stakeholder having an overproportionate share in driving the growth and acceleration. So definitely as a VC, you have a role to play, and you can.
Even more so.
Lucrative.
So I think a lot of schools and a lot of people, a lot of the EdTech companies I see that are really succeeding is that they don't just talk about team, they incentivize their team. They make everyone a stakeholder. So I think, EdTech is one of the pioneers where this change can happen. It's not like, hey, let's make some people returns. It's like, we're all each other's resources. And you can't just say, when we look at the cap table, it can't just be like the founder has like all of the company, or it can't be like, one investor is just calling all the shots. It can't be that way.
Great, and that might be a good transition to one of the questions that was asked anonymously, but which was really about reducing the gap between underprivileged or unprivileged and privileged kids. So again, it comes a little bit into the context of impact investing, right?
Yes.
So is EdTech the solution, or should provide solutions, and can it provide solutions?
EdTech is the only way, actually, that we can reduce the gap. Because EdTech is intrinsically tied to what people, like a lot of people don't realize, is actually the future of work, the way we live. So we don't plant those seeds early and make sure that everyone has access. Whenever I look at the startups, I make sure that, or the tech companies, there has to be access for everyone. One of the reasons why social media exploded the way it did is because it was accessible to everyone. The reason why certain people had uneven advantages is that social media and certain people who do advertising, they can outweigh it to their own advantage. But what's really important, I think, is the pay it forward model. So one of my friends, I'm not involved in this company, had started a company called Pencils of Promise. It's almost like the one for me and one for someone else model. So you buy one and it also funds someone else. So I asked that, like, you know, my kids are at a very nice school. I asked that, like, in the future too, like, and for the kids, I always, one thing I've done is I've given piano concerts, and then my children have made art for good as well. So I want to make sure that all schools and all stakeholders, if you're creating something for good, make sure you reserve a portion and make sure that, you know, if you're paying tuition, I would pay 10% more to make sure another child can also partake.
Great, actually, so again, clarifying that as kind of like a statement and given now, and the impact it creates. I mean, it also talking and coming back, you know, Miasina, to ecosystems and different stakeholders, right? Corporates and corporate CSR budgets, right? How much should they and how can they maybe be more incentivized to spend? I don't know if you have good examples from Finland in terms of how this incentive was created or it naturally comes. I mean, here in Hong Kong, very often to have access to such funding requires certain boxes that you can tick with tax breaks, etc., which seem not to be available for the EdTech startups here. So I don't know if you have some success cases to share from your part.
As mentioned, that we have these actual verticals for City of Helsinki is supporting, and actually we have Health Incubator Helsinki, which is our twin for EdTech Incubator, and it has been established in cooperation with City of Helsinki and University of Helsinki. So it is the one real life example about the incubator process, that when academics and City of Helsinki puts resources together, and there are now third batch coming in, and there are really success cases for the startups. So they have managed to raise, for example, quite remarkable sums of investments. So that is the one, and then we have seen the examples from City of Helsinki's startup ecosystem. We have a quite trustful and open mindset, so we don't hide any information, and we share our networks, we share our ideas. So that is one that comes into the culture and trust.
Are there any bigger brand names, corporates out there that you could state as a positive example on leading the way and financing some of these wonderful solutions or companies?
I don't have any specific in my mind. I have to investigate that. Thanks.
Okay, sure. I don't know, how does it in Israel? I mean, I don't know, I just want to close on that question a little bit before. There's one question I'm definitely going to ask Olli, because that's going to be upvoted by the audience, which is about the criteria for good EdTech platforms. But maybe just very quickly, Avi, in Israel, do you have some examples, maybe also again from the private sector, investors or corporates that are clearly showing and leading by example?
Yeah, actually, I think, first of all, personally and mindset, we try to avoid CSR money. We believe that when we are reaching to the conversation from the philanthropic perspective, we are losing a lot. We prefer to convince the stakeholders that this is a worthwhile, and I believe that even in the underserved population, there is a business model. We just have to find it. But going back to the big corporates or the private corporates, I think what's unique maybe in Israel, as you know, there are lots of unicorns and lots of technology companies that were growing dramatically in the last years. And since we are a small country and a very connected one, I have no problem to reach any one of the CEOs of those companies to bring them to hackathon, to bring in to mentor a new startup, to find ways to collaborate with their technology, let's say gaming technology, into educational one. I think this is much more attractive kind of involvement that can be developed through this. And if I have to mention a few companies like this, so I think Outbrain is one, like the CEO, one of the founders is literally spending a lot of time with us and with other startups. Another one is Wix, that maybe you came across, a very active company in the Israeli ecosystem and very active in education as well. And of course, and also the multinational companies are adopting the same kind of culture, like Intel, Microsoft, etc., are acting similarly, because in the end of the day, those are the same people. The one that was in Outbrain yesterday will be today in Intel, and vice versa. So it's
Right, absolutely, fully, and which kind of like then comes back to how do I assess a really good or great EdTech platform and solution? And Olli, maybe you want to give it a shot, but the question from the audience was, what do you think are the basic criteria for a good EdTech platform or solution? And maybe let me build on and make it like two parts of the question. So one is, was it kind of like the right to play? So what are like the bare minimum criteria that platforms need to provide? And then what is kind of like the right to win? So where do we have the outstanding ones, and in which areas do they excel? And how do I assess that as an investor, as a user?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and very often asked from us as well. Naturally, we have our own criteria when we evaluate the pedagogical quality and educational value of learning solutions. We have this EdTech design framework that we're sharing with our clients and also hosting workshops about. We describe the criteria through 4 letters, OPUS. So OPUS is the short form for the criteria, and those letters mean O stands for objectives. So making sure that the learning solution provides relevant learning objectives for the learners. Then P stands for pedagogy, making sure that the learning activities, how the learning process is guided and facilitated, is done pedagogically valid way. U stands for user experience, so it needs to be easy to use, fun to use, intuitive to use. And then S stands for support, which is very often sort of forgotten when thinking about the design of the tech solution as something static, but support, providing training for the users, building this kind of relationship with your users, that you're continuously improving the ways how your solution is being used by the learners or by the teachers or by the schools. So these four different aspects are the criteria that we see as something very valuable for EdTech solutions.
That's super helpful. Arguably, there's a follow-on question to you to ask, how do you evaluate and score then companies with that framework? And do you use a diverse group of teachers from around the world to remove any bias?
Yeah, we have teachers or teacher evaluators around the world. We have a few in Singapore. We have 14 teachers we've trained in Switzerland, about 10 teachers in Austria. But when we do certificate evaluations, we mainly work with Finnish teachers. In order to be able to evaluate the pedagogical quality of a solution, we first need to always understand that what's the context for the use of the solution, what's the purpose for the use of the solution. Because you don't have this kind of one size fits for all type of pedagogy that works for all cases. So each evaluation, we always begin by first defining what are the learning goals of the solution. And we do that through mapping the solution against relevant reference curriculum. And there's no criteria for the certification with this learning goals definition. It's up to the company to decide which learning goals they want to support and provide for the learners. But only after we understand what are the learning goals, we are able to evaluate the pedagogy. When we evaluate the pedagogy, we have 4 different pedagogical aspects we look into, and those are whether the solution provides active or passive learning experience, whether it provides individual or collaborative learning experience, whether it provides a linear or non-linear open-ended learning journey or learning experience, and if the learning experience is based on drilling and repetition, or if it's based on a constructivistic approach, this type of knowledge building approach. And which one we prefer, or which end of these scales we prefer, it always depends on the learning goals. And then naturally, as last part of the evaluation, we look at the user experience and the usability of the solution. It needs to be fluent. There can't be any bugs and so on.
Wonderful. Well, arguably there might be a wonderful opportunity that we just identified. I mean, we're already connected between Israel, Finland, and Hong Kong. Now to expand, right, the type of evaluation process and criteria you include, and maybe a cross-geography collaboration. We'll bring that back to the organizers. Jennifer, there's one question from the audience with regards to the investor perspective. From an investor or even startup founder's point of view, do you think EdTech startups have more or less difficulties in attracting talent and or funding?
Oh, wow, this is a toughie, because I think I want to kind of play both sides of the fence. So EdTech in general, it's a very hot sector right now. That can't be denied. I think the pandemic has really accelerated it even more. But I think actually from an investor point of view, as well as from companies who are trying to scale up and attract the right talent and also attract funding, it's a two-way street. Everyone is pickier these days. The pandemic has made us very picky about how we spend our time, who we spend our time with, where we work, what conferences we go to, whether or not it's hybrid, whether or not we want to spend time. I mean, it's made us all pickier. I think everyone has heard about the general talent, I guess, a dearth of talent. Less people. I think it's called the grand. I don't want to call it the grand.
Battle?
The grand, like I don't want to call it. It's not a recession. It's basically a grand resignation. The grand resignation. People feeling just generally resigned, malaise, feeling like, oh, do I want to go back to work in a traditional workplace? So because even before pandemic, the way people work and learn was already changing. People only got pickier about like, oh, who do I want to quarantine with? Who should I travel to see? What should I be doing? So I think from the same point of view, we've always been, as investors, as well as even as also an entrepreneur, because I'm both actually. Everyone is very picky about who is on the cap table. Like not only who do you invest in, but who are you co-investing with? What is the startup? Who is in there? And then as a startup as well, your talent, it's not the funding, it's your talent and your team that will make or break you. It's about the human capital. It's not about the capital, because there's just a lot of capital everywhere, sure. But it's not about like, oh, what kind, you also have to look at what kind of capital. Is it smart capital? Is it good capital? You know, and you have to also look at the eventual outcomes. There's some investors who are like, oh, I just want an exit. I want it to be acquired. Do you want to look for someone sustainable? So I think from the investor point of view, I think it's a hot sector, but everyone is in general much pickier, as they should be. Thanks.
Wonderful, yes. And actually it's interesting because this question about talent and funding comes out in any conference, in every sector, arguably. There's one more question. I think we do have time if I can trust this clock here. If not, again, to the organizers, just please jump on stage and rip the microphone away from me. But there's one more question, which is in your view, and apparently that's for everyone, so I'm happy to hear a statement from each of you. How can we help teachers and students and or parents, and I guess also, again, administrators, shorten the learning curve of finding and then using new EdTech tools? I don't know, maybe we'll start here, Jennifer, and then we'll go the other way around.
Sure, we'll go reverse round robin.
Reverse round.
So basically, it was very funny because when the pandemic started, people were like, oh, the kids are using Zoom. Do you know what Zoom is? I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been using it like 6 years ago. I've been using this for a long time. And people don't realize Zoom is actually EdTech. It's actually also prop tech. So I think the biggest way to challenge this learning curve is not as investors just to invest in new things and look at the impact, look at what people are going to use. One of our panelists earlier was talking about like the UI, the usability. One of the ways we can challenge and shorten this learning curve is using it all together. One thing I do with my kids all the time, I learn to code with them. My kids have been coding since age 2. Just jump in and do it. Use the technology. Use it so the technology does not outpace you. That's one way. And then the other way is to figure out where the gaps are. If it doesn't make sense, don't make it more complicated. Keep things simple and use it. And even all the other productivity tools, for example, like I've been using Asana, Trello, everything for years. And people are like, huh, should I use it? yes, you should. You're not a machine, but you should learn to make yourself more efficient in any way you can. Thanks.
Great. Yes, Avi, I don't know if you have a specific perspective with a specific amount of time, hours, days spent. What's your perspective?
Times about adoption.
On average, yeah, how much time do you think teachers and students and parents need to spend to learn a platform effectively? Or is that potentially even a way of evaluating, platforms by saying, okay, how difficult it actually is to onboard?
Well, I think ideally it should be the same answer as to the question how much time you and me has to dedicate time for using technology in our daily lives. It should be transparent. I think the future of EdTech would be that we would not speak about EdTech anymore. It's going to be reality. It's like saying how much time do we spend with books or with pencils. It's part of the reality, and we must do it as we go. We cannot really spend time to learn it. It should happen in a very natural way, in one sense all the time, and in the other sense never. It's like I wouldn't see it as a goal of time measured.
Right, Olli?
Well, from my perspective, I'm originally a teacher, and I can say I've familiarized myself with a couple hundred EdTech solutions over the last couple of years. And I can say that it does take a lot of time to truly understand how the solution works and how I can benefit from the use of it as a teacher. I also used to evaluate the solutions in the earlier days when we started to do the work that we do. I always spent a couple hours just by myself experimenting a solution, trying to understand how it works and what learning goals I can cover with it. But after that, after dedicating maybe 2, 3, 4 hours using the solution, I was really an expert of the solution. I could go out and train other teachers how to use the solution. And very many cases, the first impression was a bit misleading. So sometimes with something a lot of like fun applications, very easy to begin the use with, and that kind of easy approach. Sometimes I realized that, okay, this is it. After 2 hours, there's no more use for this type of solution. Whereas those solutions that it took more time to understand how to use those and what can I do with these solutions, you maybe after a couple of hours you realize that, okay, I could do my whole semester with this tool. I can do everything in my classroom with this tool, but I just didn't realize it at first. And this is quite important. It's good to give teachers the time to dedicate, to familiarize with the solutions in order for them to use those in a pedagogically valid way.
Well, thank you very much. And Miestina, maybe last comment from you on that topic or in general?
I think that I'm quite opposite on Olli, so I always learn by doing, and I don't have any patience for going into manuals or something. But I think that learners, especially, that we take them for participating and creating new innovations together. And what comes to teachers, so it has to come from the real need, so that how it helps the education and learners to learn. So if we tackle these points, so then we are more wiser together.
Wonderful, great. Actually, these last comments were kind of like a closing statement, right? And I get a sign here as well. And obviously, as much as we would have been tempted to give an overall conclusion, I think this honor and pleasure is now up to the following panel that will give an overall conclusion, not only of this very, very exciting panel. Thank you very much. Maybe a big hand of applause for all my wonderful panelists. Thank you so much. But yeah, also a closing remark for the overall summit. So with that, I'll hand it back over. And again, congratulations and thank you for Edventures, GBA and Esperanza for hosting such a meaningful summit.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.